I have to give credit actually to my younger brother Frank. He was 3 years older, 3 years younger than I at the time. I was 17, he was 14, and he was incredibly, strong for his age. I couldn't beat him at wrestling, even though he was 3 years younger, and I considered myself stronger than average. We used to wrestle and fight quite a bit. There was considerable rivalry between us. And one day, he came home from school. And incidentally, I should add that if he hadn't been attending a different school from I would never have been introduced to Wing Chun. I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you. He just happened to go to a different school, St. Francis Xavier's College, and I went to King George V School. So I was already home when he came home from school, and he said, guess what I learned at school today? So I said, what? And he said, throw a punch. So I went up to him and just threw a straight left, and was immediately yanked off my feet, and was kind of trapped, pulled off my feet, lost my balance, and he had his fist under my nose. And I said, well, okay, do that again. Because as I said, we were always competing. So I tried a second one, same result. Third time, I thought, what can I do that's a bit different? And I had been teaching myself karate from a book that a Japanese pen pal had sent to me. So I decided to throw a reverse punch, a gyakuzuki, and I went, and I vaguely remember my arm just being palmed down and his fist under my nose again. So that was it. I said, okay, so tell me all about it. What is all this? Where did you learn that? And he mentioned that there's this very interesting Chinese guy at school who knew Chinese boxing. He liked to sort of show off his skills at recess, at lunch, and he had begun showing techniques to some of his closest friends, if you like, and that's whom he had sort of learned it from. So I was very impressed, and I said, is there any chance I could see a bit more of this? Could I meet this guy? And he said, maybe, and nothing happened for a couple of weeks, and then one afternoon he turned up with this guy in tow. He introduced him to me. I couldn't remember his name. He was a very well-groomed young man, about my height, maybe half an inch shorter, just slightly. Hair slicked back, wearing black horn-rimmed glasses, looked very bookish, a bit nerdish, if you like. Didn't smile, and he started to do the Sunim Tao form for me, and I was just looking at it and wasn't particularly, impressed or thrilled by it, and as you know, many people find the Sunim Tao very, very boring compared with other kung fu forms. And when that was over, he said, let's do a little sparring, and immediately I thought, what do you mean? And he said, no, we're not going to hit hard. Just want to show you something. So he asked me to extend my arms like this, and he placed his arms on mine, so we were linked. And then he turned his head away so he couldn't see me, and then he invited me to just try and make contact with his face, chest, anywhere. And so I thought, okay, and I started, and I was quite frustrated by this. I just couldn't make contact with his face or chest because he kept deflecting my arms, pinning them, pulling me slightly off balance, and almost in every case ending up with a fist under my nose, just as my brother had done. So I was very impressed with this. This went on for, I would say, at least a minute, and then we stopped. And I was just, blown away, if you like. I didn't say very much. And he then showed me some notes he'd written on what turned out to be the history of Kung Fu. It was only of Wing Chun, actually. which was the name of his style, and it was just a one-page or two-page thing. And I remember the particular spelling, W-I-N-G, C-H-U-I-N. Years later, I discovered that's a misspelling in English. And of course, had been introduced to me as Bruce Lee, but of course that had no meaning for me. At that time, Bruce had been acting in Chinese films. In fact, he started as a little kid, and he was still making movies. Had just finished making a movie at that time, and but the name didn't register with me. So it was only afterwards that I finally realized the significance of that meeting, and that was it. And so they left there. The Hong Kong Inter-School Boxing Championships were being held at St. George's School, which is the school for Army children of Army personnel. I went along with my schoolmates to cheer on our boxers. Frank went with his schoolmates to cheer on their boxers. And a schoolmate of mine, a guy called Gary Elms, little guy, much lighter than I, but really, really a tough nut. I would describe tough little nut. He was fighting, and his opponent just turned out to be Bruce Lee. And I went, wow, that's the guy who dazzled me with all his skills. And the bout began, and it just turned out to be the weirdest, most bizarre boxing match I've ever seen in my life. I don't think I'll ever see one like that ever again. And there were 3 rounds. They were quite short rounds. They could have been as short as 1 minute, maybe as long as 2 minutes, but it was certainly not 3-minute rounds. And Bruce had his arms extended, not too much, about like this, Mansao and the Wusao. And Gary tried very hard to, tried through a few tentative jabs, and then every time he tried to connect with Bruce would just move his arms slightly sideways, slightly down, slightly up, and he created a kind of deflection system, sort of a defensive perimeter. And then after a while, when he had enough of deflecting Gary's attacks, he went on the attack himself and just came in with a couple of very quick chain punches, and Gary ended up on his back, knocked off his feet. But instead of being hurt or dazed, he just jumped straight back up into the fray, and this kept repeating through all 3 rounds. And each time Bruce would connect, Gary would get knocked back, fall on his back, and jump up again. But you could tell that Gary wasn't hurt because the ref made no attempt to stop the fight to see if Gary was okay or not. And throughout, I can say, did I mention that Gary was unable to connect early on? Yeah, this is what made it so bizarre, that Gary did not land one scoring punch on Bruce, not one. Every punch was deflected or missed. Yeah. And when the fight was over, Frank and his schoolmates went up to congratulate Bruce, but Bruce was looking disappointed, shaking his head. So Frank just said, "What's up?" And he said, Bruce's reply was very succinct, straightforward, "I couldn't knock the bastard out," okay, or words to that effect. And the reason was that they were wearing these 16-ounce gloves, a lot of padding, and Bruce was attempting to knock out Gary using the rather exaggerated upward tilt of the fist, which was very much the thing at the time, but it got abandoned sometime afterwards, and for good reason. You could hurt yourself. And the reason was because of the padding. As Bruce was trying to force the energy through, that padding stopped him from actually getting the energy through, and it turned into a push, if you like. And that's what happened violent push. That's why Gary would just go almost catapulted backwards and land on his back. And at that time, there was another bout which took place, and one of the two boxers was a guy called Peter Burton. Peter Burton. He was half German and half English. He had a German mother, English father, and he was by far the most stylish boxer there. He'd obviously been trained by his father or someone in the army, and he easily, beat his opponent, outpointed him very clearly. And I think in the end of the first round or halfway through the second round, he stopped his opponent right in the tracks. His opponent just stood there, standing with a glazed look on his eye, and the ref immediately stepped in. And Bruce said to Frank, I'm going to train until I can get that punch working, and that's the guy I want to fight next time. Even though Peter was much heavier than Bruce. So it's unlikely that fight would ever have taken place. Yeah. Anyway, I was very impressed. It stayed in my memory, that fight, and years afterwards when others published their accounts of the fight, I felt right away they were all inaccurate. That's why I decided to set the record straight and wrote what in my mind was the accurate account in an interview for Inside Kung Fu magazine, in 1994. Yeah. It so happened that it wasn't long after watching him box in the championships that Bruce actually left for the United States, and the rest, of course, is history. But after he had left, I said to Frank, I really would love to, learn some, Wing Chun, and could he, find me a teacher, perhaps? And Frank sort of said, yeah, maybe. There was this rivalry there. And anyway, I heard nothing more. And then one day Frank said to me that he has a classmate called Peter Ko, he was a Korean bloke, who could introduce me to a Wing Chun teacher. And as it turned out, I think it was Peter. He introduced me and a schoolmate of mine, a guy called Billy Sylvie. He was Eurasian, as I was, and he had a Chinese mother and Irish father. And I had persuaded Billy to, come and do this with me, because I'd showed him some of the things that I'd been shown. And so we met up with Peter Ko, took the two of us and introduced us to a guy. He was he was very dark-skinned, and he looked as if he had some Indian, blood in him. And I subsequently found out his nickname was Hak Jai, which I understand means black boy or something like that. Yeah. And anyway, Peter left us, and this guy took us to a cinema of all places. It's forgotten the name of the place, could have been the Zenith. It used to show all these reruns of Hollywood movies. It was sometime between the 2:30 and 5:30 performances, so there's no one there. He took us up to the first floor landing and showed us some punching, and then he asked Billy and me to link our arms and taught us a really crude form of Chi-Sao. Yeah. Now, that's sort of unheard of, that you would have two complete beginners doing Chi-Sao. But that was his way of sort of showing us something, and he probably couldn't think of anything else to do or didn't want to show us anything else. So there's Billy and I almost wrestling with each other, trying to, And then we stopped, and then he took us from there, and we ended up at what I think subsequently I found out was known as the Lee Cheng Ok resettlement area. Lots of refugees living there. And I recall this sort of concrete type building. I think it was only one story. We walked in through the door, and what attracted our attention immediately was a bunch of guys doing Wing Chun, and I have a vivid memory of a very tall bloke doing Gosao with a much smaller bloke, and the big guy was just almost bullying the little guy, pushing him back and striking him at will. The little guy was retreating and trying to protect himself. And then a few minutes later, who should come in? But again, I had no idea who he was. I only found out his name afterwards, and it was the Grandmaster himself, Ip Man. I was struck by his very friendly demeanor. He was quite short, seemed to have fairly large fists and well-built forearms, and I couldn't speak much Cantonese at all, so I felt a bit sort of at a loss. But Billy could speak fluent Cantonese, so he did he carried on a conversation with Ip Man, and it transpired that Ip Man was quite happy for us to start training there the following week, and so we said our goodbyes. I was very polite, but I felt a bit of a fool not being able to converse in Cantonese. So we left, and Billy went home, I went home, and I told my parents about this meeting with a Wing Chun teacher, a Wing Chun master, and to my shock, horror, and disappointment, my mother just freaked out and said, no, you cannot do this, you must not go back there. These could be very dangerous people, they may be criminals, no. So she was being very snobbish about the whole thing, and it kind of broke my heart, because my father said, come on, it's all right, but my mother, no. That was it. And years later, in the mid-90s or thereabouts, Billy and I met again. After all these years, we met in Perth. He just happened to look in the phone book, found me, and we met, and we had a great time. We were together for hours talking, and he told me, and I was really surprised and a bit sort of, taken aback by this, and also felt a little bit envious and a bit jealous, because what happened was he actually went back a week or two later by himself, because although Billy and I were friends, we didn't sort of see each other every day and so on. He decided to go back for a second time and actually got Yip Man to show him a bit of Wing Chun techniques. He even demonstrated his punching and certain training devices. And this isn't the time to go into the detail of all this, but it could be the subject of a special interview, and it would be really interesting. So you could say he was the first outsider, if you like, to have actually been personally taught a few things by Yip Man. If my parents hadn't objected, then I could have started training there. As it happened, even Billy met the same sort of reaction from his mother. He went home and said, I want to start learning. And his mother, who was Chinese, said, no, these are, possibly from the underworld, all that sort of thing. But Billy wasn't like me. He was much more cavalier, extrovert, happy-go-lucky, and said, too bad. But I took it very personally, okay. People may not sort of be expecting this answer here. frankly, I'd never heard of Wang Shangleng. Yeah? In fact, I didn't even know his name until shortly after I started training with him. When I returned to Hong Kong in 1964 after my uni studies, my father, who was based in Hong Kong, invited me to the Tokyo Olympics, which was a fantastic experience. When we came back in October sometime, I wanted to look for a Wing Chun teacher, and but I just didn't know where to start. I couldn't speak any Cantonese, and I was getting a bit sort of frustrated. And then I thought, in the meantime, I might as well keep fit doing some more judo. And fortunately, I found a training venue, the local Chinese YMCA in Waterloo Road, I think, did judo classes. So I joined, and met some interesting people from around the world, visitors from Japan. So I did randori with them, and then came the afternoon when we were doing randori, and I was looking for another training partner, and he turned out to be one of the older senior students from that school that I taught English at before I went to university, the Puisan College in Mongkok, Kowloon. And he recognized me right away, so I recognized him. And inevitably, I had to ask him, can you find me a Wing Chun teacher? And he said he'd do his best, and I gave him my phone number. And I must say that I was kept waiting for that phone to ring, but it never did. So it seemed. And then weeks later, out of the blue, came this phone call and said, yes, I can take you to a teacher who doesn't mind teaching foreigners, if you like. Yeah, okay. And on the day, my former student and I, we went to a building in Nathan Road, and we were met by a stocky gentleman. He was about 5 or 6 years older than I, and it turned out to be Wu Chun Nam. Yeah? And the significance of that, didn't dawn on me until years later. And since I couldn't speak any Cantonese, my student did all the talking, and he basically, I don't mean this unkindly, but he sold Wu Chun Nam a bit of a story about how I'd heard of his master's reputation, and I'd come all the way from the United Kingdom to learn from him, and so on, etc. And Wu Chun Nam sort of would look at me from time to time, and the upshot was that he must have thought that I was an okay guy, not a troublemaker or anything like that. And he told my student, yes, you can tell Rolf to come back next week and to start lessons. And that's how it started. And I must say at this point that I'm forever grateful to Wu Chun Nam for actually approving me, so to speak, approving of me. And anyway, I went back the following week, went up to the rooftop, and I recall that there was hardly any lighting. That there may have been a power cut. There was sort of ambient lighting from outside, and I was immediately approached by a very charming, nice-looking Chinese girl, and who spoke fluent English, and she decided to look after me. She told me that Wang Zifu wasn't there. He wouldn't be there this evening, but she took me to some of the students who showed me some basic punching and even started me on the opening movements of the Sunim Tao. Yeah. Then the next night, it was the same week, I went back again, and that's where I first met Wang Zifu. Yeah, right? And yeah, that's how I basically started. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, what was he like as a person?
I can honestly say I was really struck by how friendly he was. He was very friendly, very approachable, and he seemed to show a genuine interest in me as a person. Yeah, and had mentioned that that same evening I had been introduced to a guy called Ron Lee, Australian of Chinese descent. He spoke fluent English, and he became my training partner, if you like, and he did all the interpreting. And so Sifu wanted to know about my martial arts background, if any, and I told him how I'd done a lot of wrestling at school, some Western boxing, done 3 months of Kyokushinkai karate, and 5.5 years of Judo. He's really fascinated by all that. And I would describe him as a very, very friendly, sort of warm, human being, and I think we just hit it off like that. Yeah. There was an instant rapport, if you like. I wasn't just another student, if you like. Yeah. He seemed to take a personal interest in me, and for reasons which may become evident a little later. Yeah. Okay. Let me start by saying that when I joined, I thought that was Wang Sifu's rooftop school. It was only years after that I learned that that wasn't his official school at all. And I discovered that Wang Sifu opened his first public school not until 1969, some 4 years after I left him. But looking back now, I realize that it was Wang's unofficial, rooftop school. And I read an article where that period was described by the authors who were writing about Wang as teaching Wing Chun as a hobby, rather than as a profession, if you like, or as a proper job. Yeah. And so I was very fortunate to have been there during that period, sort of a period that was never repeated, because from 69 he became someone teaching the public, with new responsibilities and so on. Whereas the time that I was there, the atmosphere was much more easygoing, and Wang Sifu wasn't interested so much in teaching the formal system, but he was more interested in the practical aspects of Wing Chun, how to actually use it and fight with it. And as a teacher, he was very, he was just not your typical Sifu, not at all. Has been described as an older brother looking after his younger brother, so to speak. And he was very humble, had a nice dry sense of humor, and he would often laugh at a joke or say something funny, but it wasn't really a laugh. It was more of a throaty chuckle, and it was quite memorable. And that voice of his and his chuckle, I shall always remember. There was nothing quite like it. And he did not conduct classes as such. He would never lead the class in training. People would just do their own thing. It's known as typical sort of Hong Kong style, teaching, and not everyone would be training. Some would be just chatting away and gossiping and so on. Every now and then he might just go over to 2 or 3 guys who were just chatting away, and instead of say get back in there and do some training, he would say more or less the Chinese equivalent of "Come on, guys, let's do a bit of training." And of course they would just had nothing but respect for the guy. And he did, I must say, it's not my imagination, take a particular interest in what I was doing. Yeah? So he personally sort of introduced me to Luxao, and a bit of stepping towards the end. And I found that because I was relying so much on strength rather than skill, it's just not, obviously not used to the niceties and subtleties of, Chi Sao. And I would find myself tiring very easily. After about 2-3 minutes of it, I'd ask to stop because my shoulders and arms were aching, and Sifu found it kind of amusing, so did some of the others with whom I did. And anyway, it was, so he showed me certain aspects of Wing Chun and Siu Tao, and I don't think in the 6 months I was with him that we got beyond that. Some footwork, some Chi Sao, and some basic, punching. There was a wall bag in the corner, sitting on a ledge. I nearly broke my fist on one of those when I was attempting a karate type punch. Anyway, yes.
Were there any particular drills that you remember that you did?
Yeah. No, there were no drills as such. Nothing like the Pak Da drill and the many of the other drills so beloved in Wing Chun clubs today. It was just very basic, stuff. Just a form, bit of footwork, but where it was sort of different was that he placed more emphasis on how to use Wing Chun, yeah? And even right from the start, it could have been either the very first time that I actually met, the time when I met Wong Sifu for the first time, or it could have been the following class. But having heard that I used to box at school and with my friends, he asked me through Ron whether I would be prepared to just do a little bit of friendly sparring with one of his senior students. The student would use Wing Chun and I would box him. And of course, the adrenaline started to rise. I was a bit nervous about the thing. And Wong Sifu assured me, via Ron again, they'll tell Rolf, it's not to worry. It's not going to be a full-out, fight. It's just a friendly spar. So my opponent, if you like, what struck me about him was that he was taller, the tallest person there. Yeah? I would say about 2-3 inches taller than I. I'm pretty short myself, but I was taller than most of the guys there. But no one was taller than I was, except for this guy. And he was fairly, well built. He wasn't skinny or anything like that. And so we put on our gloves and we started off. And I was a bit nervous, but I thought, I felt as if, I had to put up a decent show, And to my surprise, I found that I could score on him fairly easily. And it turned out that his Wing Chun wasn't particularly effective. Yeah? So he didn't hardly score on me, and I was sort of picking him off, and he became increasingly frustrated because I was a bit of a hit-and-run boxer, I'm going to dodge away, and he would sort of fall short, get hit, and then he became very sort of frustrated, and he started charging at me using a series of gansaos. I don't think I've seen much of that, where you actually start your attack by just charging at a person with gansaos. And I managed to keep my cool, and every time he sort of came, I would sort of hit him just when his hand passed. It's like firing through one of these propellers, in World War I. And he became increasingly frustrated, and then he finally came sort of charging at me with a kind of chain punching attack. And I kept retreating because I wasn't ready for that kind of intensity. And I kept looking behind, and I noticed there was a little sort of like a parapet, a very low wall. I thought any minute now I'm going to trip over this. And he came charging at me, so I just covered up like a boxer does, and sort of I ducked. And then I just thought, enough of this. This could turn, serious. So I just said, okay, enough, and straightened up. And people they laughed, they clapped, and and that was it. Yeah. So that kind of thing became quite the usual thing. There were many sort of classes where Sifu would ask me to play the Western boxer against his students doing some Wing Chun, and vice versa. He'd ask me to practice my Wing Chun against his students doing boxing. And I must be sort of frank here. The standard of his students' Wing Chun wasn't that high. Yeah, and with my boxing, could easily pick him off. There was one particular fight which was over in about 5 seconds. I threw out a straight left, raised his hands. I threw out a low one, dropped his hands, and the third one was so fast that he didn't have time to get his hands up. Caught him square on the button, and he quit just there and then. And on another occasion, I played the Wing Chun guy and got my partner to attempt some sort of boxing. And we were both wearing, at that time, these very high-heeled shoes. I think subsequently were known as Cuban heels or whatever and so on. And we'd both come straight from work, still had my short sleeve shirt on, tie and everything, and I faced him, and I started to move towards him, and he started slowly to move towards me. And then I just thought, I just leaped forward, and I just leapt forward with a fast, straight punch. And that caught him by surprise, shocked him so much that he instantly sort of recoiled, moved back a bit. So my punch didn't quite catch him, fully, but it was enough impact, plus his moving back in shock, for him to fall over backwards. I think he did a kind of a backward somersault, stood up, he was white as a sheet, and he said, "No more, no more." And I was pretty concerned for him, because this is all, hard, concrete brick floors, and he could have been, seriously hurt. So it went on like that. And then came the time when Wang Sifu, this was one evening where he, Ron, and I were the only 3 people there. Nobody else turned up, that particular evening. And he said to Ronnie, would Rolf be willing to just do a little spar with me? And of course, as soon as I heard that, you can imagine my reaction. Yeah, I felt, trepidation, all the rest of it, and so on. And then he smiled and said, "Tell Rolf not to worry. I'm not going to hurt him. I want Rolf to just use Wing Chun, and I will box." And as you know, Wang was, from all reports, a reasonably competent, good Western boxer. And so we put on our gloves, and we went at it. And I did my usual sort of hit and run, and I used whatever Wing Chun I thought, I knew. And it went on for, I would say, about 3-4 minutes. And if you could score it, it was fairly drawish, I landed sort of roughly about as many blows as he did on me, not hard on either side. And I could tell that he was sort of going, easy on me. And when it was over, he said to Ron, "Tell Rolf that was very good, but next time, tell him not to use so much boxing," because as it turned out, I was using a mixture of boxing and the little Wing Chun that I had learned. But when he said the next time, I thought, oh no, it's going to be a next time, right? And this was after 3 months of training. And about a month later, 3-4 weeks later, he asked again, and funnily enough, we were the only 3 guys on the rooftop. He asked again, "Is Rolf ready for another one?" And I said, "Okay, same thing will apply, but tell Rolf, make sure he doesn't use any boxing." And funnily enough, in the intervening period, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, my Wing Chun had improved so much. And I felt so confident this time, I was quite ready to just use pure Wing Chun. And we went at it, and this time was a different ball game. In fact, I was actually, dare I say it, landing more blows than he was landing on me. Yeah, okay. And as we were about halfway through, I managed to pull off some ridiculous moves. As he threw a straight left at me or a jab, I managed to catch it with a Hun Sao, to the outside and hit him at the same time. And I did that twice, and each time he yelled out, "Ho ye, which is like the Chinese equivalent of nice one, nice one. And then suddenly he said to Ron, "Tell Rolf he's doing very well, but tell him to hit harder. Tell him to hit really harder." And then as soon as I heard that, I don't know what went through me. I thought, no, I can't do that, And the thoughts that rushed through my mind is, one, he's your teacher. You don't sort of, try and hit your teacher as hard as you can. But that wasn't the main reason. The more compelling reason was that if I did hit him pretty hard, there's always a possibility that he might just lose his cool and then unleash his Wing Chun on me, and I didn't want to face that. Yeah, and so I sort of looked at Ron and I looked at Wong, and I had this sort of sickly grin on my face. I said, "No, I can't do that." And anyway, he said, "Go on, tell him to fight, hit harder," and I was still scoring on him, but not hitting as hard as he wanted me to. And then out of nowhere came a hook, which hit me right on my left ear, bang, and rocked me a bit. And immediately a strange ringing started in my ear. And I kid you not, for the next 2-3 days, this ringing was there all the time. I don't understand how that happened, but that's what's it. And anyway, I recovered very quickly, and we continued on, and I was still not hitting quite as hard as he wanted me to. So he was trying very hard to scorn me. He wanted to provoke me, to make me hit harder. And I managed to sort of defend myself quite well. And then out of nowhere came another hook again. And this one caught me right on the jaw. I saw stars, but I was pretty resilient and recovered very quickly. And we carried on for a little bit longer, and then we stopped. And again, he said to Ron, "Tell Rolf he's done, okay." Yeah? And I thought that was sort of it. And about a week or two later, he said to Ron, "Ask Rolf if he's willing to have a challenge match against a Tonglong boxer." And again, had the same reaction. Oh no, he wants me to actually have a challenge match. And he said, "Tell Rolf not to worry. Rolf can decide whether he wants to fight barefisted or use gloves. It doesn't matter. He will sort of referee the thing." And I said, no, I don't think so. And to tell you the truth, at that time, I was actually, when I was not doing Wing Chun, training in Wing Chun, which was 2-3 times a week, during that time I was seeing my girlfriend. So I wasn't really thinking in terms of doing challenge matches. And for the remaining 2.5 months or so, he would, every other lesson, ask Ron, "Has Rolf changed his mind? He'll be okay." Yeah. So looking back now, it's one of those things where you think, what might have been. Maybe I should have, done it. And years later, I discovered that Wong was a bit of a betting man, if you like. And I have a feeling that he wouldn't have asked me to do it unless in his own mind he was pretty sure that I would have given a good account of myself. Yeah. I think you guys will be disappointed with my answer, because just as I'd never heard of Wong Zifu, until the moment I was actually in his presence and started training with him. I'd never heard of him before that. And during the time I was there, I had no idea, really. I have no recollection of Wong's reputation as a fighter during the 50s. I don't think he ever talked about it. None of his students talked about it. And I thought about this I think I only found out about Wong's fighting reputation and his fighting record years afterwards. And from accounts written by and other people, David Peterson, for example, and others who spoke about Wong's fights. And but at that time, I had no idea that he was a fighter. My impression of him was as a really nice guy and a really friendly and helpful teacher. And however, there was one evening when there were about 7 of us there, and it transpired that Wong was talking about a challenge he had received from a local Hong Kong police inspector, a second or third dan in karate, who wanted to try his luck against Wong Sifu in a sparring match. And he was basically, seemed like Wong was asking, should I do it or shouldn't I? And after some discussion, almost to a man, they all said, "Nah, don't bother." So looking back now, I think it was, I got the impression that Wong had proved himself, years ago, and the last time he'd actually sort of done any fighting was about 3 or 4 years before I actually appeared on the scene. Yeah? So so therefore I was not present in any of these matches because these matches had ended years before I arrived on the scene, so to speak. Yeah? And the only other incident I can think of which involved Wong actually using his skills was one evening when he and his friends and schoolmates were out in Chim Cha Choi and walking along, when out of nowhere came this big Shanghainese bloke, well-built, tall, definitely over 6 foot, and slightly drunk, and for some reason he began picking on one of Wong's friends or students. So it must have been the stimulus for Wong to come to the aid of his friend or student. Obviously, some memory must have been revived. He pushed his friend out of the way and confronted this Shanghainese. And the way Wong explained it, caused quite a bit of merriment. And with this, he had this characteristic chuckle again when he was talking about it. He said, when I looked up at this guy, and this is Ron telling me all this, he's tall, long arms, and I thought it's going to be a bit difficult to get through his defense if he started punching away at me. So I just got this idea, came into my head. I just literally jumped up into the air, my feet left the ground, I leapt straight at him and hit him really hard on the nose. And it had the desired effect. The guy sort of collapsed, went down, bleeding quite profusely. And the next thing, and this is an example of the great fighter, Wong Sifu, but underneath it all a very compassionate sort of person. He immediately expressed concern for this bloke, went to minister to him, made sure he wasn't badly hurt, anything like that. And I just have this vague recollection that he said he took out his handkerchief and helped him to staunch the flow of blood. So this is the kind of man Wong was, a fighter, yes, but also a very compassionate, caring human being. And I recall another occasion when this compassion came out was when he was doing Gosao with one of his students, and it must have been a case of Lat Sao Jik Chung. Somehow his hand just shot through and he whacked the student pretty hard and immediately showed tremendous concern for, his student. And it's so unlike nowadays when people will go down really sometimes really have a go at each other. And, but on that occasion he was so concerned that he might have hurt his student badly, yeah. Okay, that's another tough question to answer because I never raised the subject with him. I can't recall ever having raised that subject with him, and I don't think he ever, talked to me about it. I just can give you sort of like an overall impression, and that was he seemed to stress the aggressive nature of, Wing Chun, which is basically attack and don't let up. Make sure you win the fight. Make sure you keep the attacker at bay by launching attacks, and I think that was kind of confirmed in a way just shortly before I left Hong Kong. Was my last meeting with Sifu. Ron was there, of course, and I remember expressing my concern that when I returned to the UK for further studies, postgraduate studies, that it would be difficult for me to find another Wing Chun school, and even if I was lucky enough to find a school, because of my limited knowledge of Wing Chun and lack of Gosao experience, I would find it difficult to train with more experienced people than I. Just had this impression that everybody else was more experienced than I. And Wong thought about it for a few seconds, and then he said to Ron, "Tell Rolf not to worry. Doesn't matter how more experienced or skilled these people that Rolf will meet with. When and whatever happens, just attack. Just attack. Don't worry about the skill. Don't worry about your lack of experience and skill. Just attack." And that made quite an impression on me. I wasn't too sure about it, his advice, but it left quite an impression on me. And surely enough, it took me nearly 3 years to find another teacher in Greco, Wong Wai Chung, and also met a guy called Paul Lam, who was actually Leung Sheung's first senior disciple. And one night when we were training, we had a visit from a bunch of guys from another Wing Chun school or group, and we were all doing some rolling, and I knew some Gosao, but not very much, quite limited. And I went up against, when we were all sort of changing partners, but I came up against what turned out to be the most experienced visitor. He'd done something like 10 years of Wing Chun, and really I'd done maybe 6 months with Wong and about maybe a year or two with at that time with Greco and Paul Lam to a less extent. And we started to roll, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do here now? And I was pretty good at exerting forward pressure. And then suddenly he would start his break and attack in. And all I could remember was Wong had said, just attack back. And so I would just strike back and attack. And funnily enough, all his attempts failed to get through because I kept jamming them with my own forward pressure and attacks. And I ended up, as we sort of finished, I apologized to him. I felt genuinely apologetic. It's kind of ironic. I said, "Look, I'm very sorry. My Wing Chun is so limited. It's not very good. I don't know how to respond to these techniques." And he looked at me for a few seconds, and he smiled and said, "No, actually, that's very good. You're doing very well." And this idea of attacking has always remained at the back of my mind. Yeah, so that's the kind of Wing Chun that you could say I find most useful for me. Not to play games, not to spend too much time, rolling and so on, etc. The idea is that you want to finish the thing as quickly as possible. And of course, I'll be criticized for this, but anyway, that's the way. That's what I took away from, my time with Wang Sifu. Yeah. All I can remember was that there was one evening when Wang started talking about how Bruce had visited Hong Kong some months previously, and they'd ended up doing a bit of, Gosao, and Wang was saying that he was so impressed with the way Bruce had improved, over the over time, and that his Gosao was now very, very good, and he was starting to score and getting through on Sifu, and that he was finding it difficult to handle Bruce. And I think it's a mark of Wang's sort of honesty and humility to actually say that, and so I found that quite impressive. But apart from that, there's really no. I can't recall any more mention of training with Bruce. Yeah.
What did Wang think of Ip Man and his approach to Wing Chun?
Well, quite frankly, I don't think he ever mentioned Ip Man in my presence. I just can't recollect any mention of Ip Man. The only instances where Ip Man's name came up was on those evenings when Wang wasn't actually there, and Ron told me when I asked him, where's Wang, where's Sifu tonight, and Ron said, oh, he's out there helping Ip Man with his teaching. So obviously either Ip Man had cut down on his teaching. I don't know whether he'd actually retired, but main thing is that Wang was doing teaching on behalf of Ip Man. Yeah. Yeah. First of all, as far as Ip Man is concerned, I feel so blessed and honored to have actually met the man himself. I know that in subsequent years there were quite a few doubters. They didn't believe that I actually met Ip Man. So I'm very pleased about that, and my memory of Ip Man is another nice guy actually, very friendly, and the fact that he was willing to accommodate Billy and me says something about the man. So it goes quite against these statements by many that Ip Man was very proudly Chinese, a bit of a racist in the sense that he would not teach any foreigners, and that he had to let go of Bruce Lee because he was a quarter German, and that's just not true. I know, I guess there was pressure put upon Ip Man to get rid of Bruce, but he liked Bruce. He was very impressed with Bruce, and he asked Wang Shenglong, you teach him on the class. So I would guess this humility, and in subsequent years I heard originally from Greco and then from others that Ip Man was very much of a, again, not your typical master or grandmaster, very down to earth, quite scientifically minded. He felt that there are many other systems of Kung Fu which are pretty good, but they take too long to learn, and the impression I got was that he saw Wing Chun as a modern system of Kung Fu. And I'm not surprised to learn that there have been people who've said that Ip Man, modern Wing Chun, started with Ip Man in Hong Kong in 1950. Prior to that, he'd learned the more classical, traditional stuff. But when he came to Hong Kong, he actually did simplify the system to make it more functional, if you like, more street effective, and not so, classical in its concepts and execution. Yeah. And as for Bruce, his influence, well, it's obvious. He dazzled me. First of all, it was my brother Frank who dazzled me, but then Bruce, of course, was like the icing on the cake, and he really got me going. And whilst Bruce went on to great heights, I would say that he inspired so many people. His influence is quite amazing. I think Time magazine or some magazine like that named him as one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. And but he was just a very unique one in a, I don't know what, you will never see someone like Bruce again. Yeah, so he was an inspiring and impressive sort of guy. Yeah. As for Wong, I think I've said quite a bit about Wong. Wong's influence was that he's like a very inspiring person. I can honestly say that I'm not into any form of idol worship. In my lifetime, I've met just a handful of individuals whom I would describe as having had an influence on me, and who were truly, truly inspirational. I'm not counting, some of my friends whom I've liked and found, but as sort of public figures who've inspired me, I can count them on the fingers of possibly one hand, and Sifu was definitely, one of them. Yeah. That's why I've been describing my Wing Chun as not Wong Chun Leung, Wing Chun Perth or whatever like that. I think that would not be appropriate for me to do that, because he never certified me as a teacher. He recognized me as a student, and I've got a letter to prove that, which I'll probably publish in another interview or in the book that I'm writing. And we are in the process of designing yet another uniform, and on the back it's going to read inspired by Wong Chun Leung. So that's what my Wing Chun is. I found him an inspirational figure. He was like the pointing finger. He pointed out, he demonstrated and pointed out the logic and rationality of Wing Chun, but ultimately he's basically saying it's, in the end you make it your own, Wing Chun. Yeah? And I'm following that path. I continue to be inspired by the man. He is the finger pointing, and I keep coming up with my own, insights, almost on a weekly basis, I would say, and I find it so fascinating. Simple and short and small as the syllabus is, and few as the concepts are, the insights are endless. There's always something more to get out of the system. Yeah. Some of you might know that I'm sort of in the middle of writing a new book, which is I've tentatively titled From Bruce Lee to Wong Chun Leung, Recollections and Reflections of a lifelong student of Wing Chun Kung Fu, or something like that. Yeah. So I've written down all my memories of my interactions with Wong Sifu, and but for the purposes of this interview, I can think of a few. One was shortly after I joined Wong's rooftop school. That night, there were again just the three of us. It goes to show that a lot of the students, were very irregular attenders. Ron and I came to every class virtually, and or maybe we were there early and the others came later. I can't be too sure about that. And he, Ron and Sifu started talking about the 1-inch punch, and then he looked at Ron and said, ask Rolf if he wants to feel the short, range punch like that. And I felt again that little bit of, and I said, okay, I'll do it. And he got hold of 2 cushions. And what was unusual about these cushions, they're not your typical, large Western style, cushions. They were quite small cushions, only about a foot square or so, not very big, 2 of them. And I somehow managed to hold them against my shoulder. I turned myself sideways onto him, and he put his fist close to me, and I just stood there bracing. And all of a sudden he punched and bang, and I felt this electric shock, course through me. It was quite painful, electric shock. And I didn't go flying because I was sideways on anyway. I did, lose my balance a bit and moved a couple of feet or so. But the outstanding memory was of this very painful type electric shock. And I have experienced, electric shocks as a child when I accidentally, touched some bare wires, and it was pretty close to that sort of feeling. And then the conversation was all about, the short range punching ability of, Wing Chun. And when I wrote my first book on Wing Chun in 1969, in the introduction or thereabouts, I talked about this punch, but I described it as a 9-inch punch, not a 1-inch punch or 3-inch punch. And I reflected on that, and then I realized that 9-inch was typical of my way of thinking, in the sense that I don't like to exaggerate things, and so I'm saying, it must have been about 9 inches. But looking back now, no, it wasn't 9 inches. Definitely closer to 6, 5, or even 3 inches. Yeah? And in 1996, I was returned to Hong Kong after a period of 65, 96, what's that, several decades later, to attend the last KG5, alumni reunion prior to the Chinese Communists taking over in January of the following year. And I was very lucky to meet, Sifu again. I remember buying a bottle of the most expensive grade of Wolf Plus, wine, because I knew he was a red wine drinker. And I took that along to the, what's that place in Nalla Road, the headquarters of the Hong Kong VTA Association. But I walked into, and there were only about 3 or 4 people training there, and one of the guys came up to me and explained that I'd come to visit Sifu, and this is a present for him with a card, and he took that, and I told him where I was staying, at the Marco Polo near the Star Ferry, Kowloon. And next day I did get a call from Sifu's son, and I still don't know whether it was John Wong Hong Chung or the other brother. And basically the message was, we'll meet you at the hotel, which was around the corner from where we were. And surely enough, I waited there, and Sifu turned up together with his wife, at least one of the sons, and one of his students who owned a restaurant in Mongkok. Yeah? And it was fantastic, to see him again. That's right, I've forgotten to mention that I did see him prior to that in 1988, yeah? So this was 96. And anyway, we went into the hotel because he wanted to treat us to some meal or whatever, and only to discover that there was no seats available. And again, this is an example of what impresses me so much, is the humility of Wang Shengleung. Instead of going up to the manager or whatever and saying, who I am, like, find me a seat, he just went, oh, too bad, let's go to my restaurant instead. So we took the tube to the underground, metro, whatever you call it, and we ended up in his restaurant in Mongkok. And it was Sifu, myself, the student who owned the restaurant, and Wong's wife at the time, widow now. And another thing that kind of blew me away, that Wong was able to converse quite fluently and easily with me in English. Of course, I felt even more of a fool for never having learned any Cantonese, but it's a sign of a man that he actually spent quite a number of years towards the end teaching himself, English, as well as practicing with foreign students. And we had a wonderful time together, about 2 hours, and we shared a couple of bottles of his favorite Chilean, red wine. And he was telling me about that he was planning to had been invited to go to Beijing to teach. And I can't remember too much of the conversation, but one thing that I felt I had to ask him was, how do you actually punch? Which part of the fist do you hit the target with? Because thanks to the influence of one of my former assistant instructors who was really into biomechanics, we had switched from the conventional method of punching, which is hitting with the full face of the fist, to hitting with the 3 knuckles, by simply making the back of the fist flush with the arm. So when you hit, the first part of the fist are these 3 knuckles. And after all, that's what the theory says. Hit with the bottom 3 knuckles, not with the top 2 knuckles or whatever. And so I asked Sifu, and I wouldn't say he was drunk or anything like that, but he was in a nice sort of very mellow mood, and he took my hand and he held it like that, kept it nice and flat, and he said, yeah, here, and here. He hit with this. I said, thank you very much. And since then, I've been teaching that. Well, I've been teaching that before that, but all this time, this is what I teach. I've run it past at least one other Wang Shanglong teacher, and I was told that there's a danger that if you punch like that you would twist your wrist. And my response was, of course, accidents can happen whether you punch like this or like this. So you've got to toughen up and train it in such a way that you don't hurt yourself. And everyone that we've tested this on, they've all said, my God, that really hurts. The pain, it's very sharp, it's penetrating. So that was a wonderful memory of Sifu. I'm just going to think aloud, if you like. And these are purely my impressions, my thoughts, and I'm sure there will be people who will not agree with some of the things I say, but I see Wong's legacy as someone who really understood if you like, the science of combat, protection, self-protection in street situations, using a very aggressive form of, Wing Chun. And you can see that when you think, when you hear about, various writers saying that Wong won his fights using no more than 2 to 3 punches. What does that tell you? It tells you that Wing Chun, when applied in all seriousness, is very, very simple, direct, and efficient. You use just 2 or 3 punches. That tells you, you don't see much, if anything, of the skills obvious skills that you see in Chi Sao and Go Sao. Just little aspects of that, little attributes. But in the end, the idea is to hit the other person, preferably before he hits you, so to speak. And there aren't many teachers that I'm aware of who teach that kind of very direct, simple sort of, attacks. I can think of one or two, but I don't think I'll, name them, just in case. Anyway, so, and I also see him as someone who was pointing away from himself. And I like the subtitle of David's book, Look Beyond the Pointing Finger. He's basically saying, Wing Chun is very scientific, it's simple, direct, but in the end, you've got to make it your own and express yourself, if you like, yeah. And his legacy. He's certainly inspired quite a few people to move along this path. But what I can say about him, he never was a commercial type of teacher. He never had large classes. Initially, I understand he didn't even wasn't very interested in going abroad and conducting seminars, but his devoted students, convinced him to go. And I think to some extent he, in the end, enjoyed going abroad. He was once asked, of all the peoples you've met, different nationalities, whom did you like best? And his answer was, I like the Spanish people the best. I've never found out exactly why, but that's very interesting. Yeah. At times, when I see some earlier photos of Wang Sifu with his mustache, he kind of, if you just don't look too hard, he sort of looks like a bit of a Mexican, sort of this kind of Spanish look about the guy. Anyway, well, it's a subject that I would really like to reflect a lot more on, and I'd like to say a lot more about this aspect, the legacy. It's too big a subject to answer satisfactorily. Yeah. First, let me say that I started with Wang Sifu, and after I left him, it took me about 3 years to find another teacher, and that turned out to be, Greco Wang Wai Chung. And it was, again, only later on that I found out that he was Moy Yat's first sort of personal, student and disciple, if you like. Yeah? And I had some exposure, not very much, to a guy called Paul Lam, who was, as I mentioned earlier, the first senior student of Leung Shun. But Paul Lam isn't actually mentioned very much, but he definitely was one of the first. But after Greco left the UK to work in Nigeria, he went there on business. I continued to train with two guys, Fred Warren and Vijay Paul, and these were two very talented Wing Chun students, and they had trained with both Greco and Paul Lam, because Greco and Paul actually ran a public school, and I've argued in an article that that was probably the first Wing Chun school that was open to the public, if you like, and Greco and Paul just hadn't received the kind of recognition which I felt they deserved. So trained with those guys for a couple of years, and subsequently I've had exposure to the Leung Ting lineages and one or two other lineages, and then of course I've got to mention my good friend and my last sort of formal teacher, if you like, David Peterson. I kind of came full circle with David Peterson. Yeah. It took me, believe it or not, 65 to about when I met David, mid 80s, something like 20 years to actually complete the syllabus. The 3 hand forms, the Mukden Jong, the Liaoning Province, and the Judo. took me about 20 years to complete that. Yeah? The syllabus, which, if you have a really intelligent, receptive student, you could complete in a couple of years or less, really. Yeah? Of course, it's a case of going deeper, deeper into one's understanding. But David actually taught me the Bajam Do and the Liaoning Province and the Mukden Jong. Yeah? But it didn't take long to do that, because I already had familiarized myself with a lot of the movements, but I didn't know the actual sequence and the form as such. And so I'm forever grateful to David for that. And we've remained, friends and stayed in contact for many years after that. We still have contact today, but not very much, because years ago I just decided to go on my own path, if you like, and I have never regretted it, doing just that. Yeah? Why do I think Wing Chun is such a wonderful art, or rather science, as Wang Zifu would prefer to call it? To me, it's very, very logical, very rational, very down to earth. And I'm talking about modern, if I can call it that, modern Wing Chun that started with Yip Man in 1950. The sort of Wing Chun which has been continuing to evolve and develop in some schools. Not everyone's been doing that. And there are definite differences between Hong Kong style, Wing Chun and mainland Chinese Wing Chun. Yeah? And I won't comment on the relative merits of each. I have strong views about that, and I'm not about to air them now. You'll have to wait for another interview or my book or whatever. Yeah? But the Yip Man's Hong Kong type Wing Chun, which has led to greater freedom of expression, if you like. Yeah? And Bruce Lee went off a bit on a tangent, if you like. Yeah? He took it out there, but in the end he came back to acknowledge the simplicity of Hong Kong like Wing Chun when in his conversations with Wang Shengleng, I understand. But many people think of Wing Chun as a definite sort of system, that everything has to be done according to the theory and according to the basic techniques and so on, etc. I don't quite see Wing Chun limited to that. It is a superb street fighting system. It's definitely originally not designed for ring fighting. If a Wing Chun guy, skilled and tough as he is, wants to fight in the ring, he'll have to train with the Muay Thai guys, with the BJJ guys, with the boxers and with the kickboxers and so on, to get used to ring fighting, because it's a different ball game. Yeah? You can't just jump into the ring and expect to do well. Yeah? As some have discovered, you have to train like them. But for the street situation, that's a different matter. It's a case of finishing the fight as quickly as you can. You don't engage in duels in the street. Forget about all the movies and so on, entertaining as they are. Wing Chun is a simplified, stripped down method of dealing with real life attacks. And the idea is to finish them off as quickly as possible. But it's not just limited to what people can identify as Wing Chun. It's the concepts that are far more important. And it is about self-expression, because a much quoted thing that Wang Shengleng saying is, do not make Wing Chun your master, yeah? Make Wing Chun your slave. And there he's actually saying, you don't have to stick rigidly to the Wing Chun code, or in fact, you can use anything that works as long as it's simple, direct, and efficient. Yeah? And the example is given of how you want to fight by, as his opponent was sort of falling forwards towards him, he kneed him in the face, and his training partner said, "Oh, that's not Wing Chun," and Wong said, "What do you mean? I can do what I like, basically." Yeah? So I believe that the Wing Chun is much more flexible and can be described as a philosophy of actual combat or fighting. And I'm sure that Wong did say at some point, it doesn't have to even look like Wing Chun that works. So we could argue that even Western boxers, if they were open enough and thought about the Wing Chun concepts and so on, they can utilize these Wing Chun concepts and add it to their, their arsenal, if you like, and modify or some of their techniques, or rather add them to their arsenal and use Wing Chun inspired, or Wing Chun based techniques. And my good colleague Manny the Matos, he and I, we first met about 10 years or so ago, and we remain good friends. Whenever he moves to a new venue, he always invites me along, so I've been following him around. And he has incorporated Wing Chun techniques and concepts in his own form of stand-up boxing called Hakarak martial, boxing. So boxers can use Wing Chun concepts. Even, when you look at something like BJJ, you will see that there's kind of concepts which are common to both BJJ and Wing Chun, like when you, are in the mount position, that you never, turn sideways to your partner, that you always maintain control of the center, don't let them get away. So it's actually not only very effective, versatile, influential, if you like, but a basic working knowledge of Wing Chun can be learned very, very quickly. I'm not kidding. I've had people who, after just 3 months, 6 months training, have managed to actually use it in real life situations without their ever becoming very good at Chi Sao or Go Sao. So there's that aspect of it, that it really delivers the promise on which the original Wing Chun was based. The founders of Wing Chun basically said, we want to come up with something that doesn't take 15, 20, 30 years to learn. We want to learn something that can be learned quickly, can be used by ordinary people, supposedly to fight against the Mongol invaders or and some stuff like that. Yeah, so that's exactly true, but unfortunately, Wing Chun hasn't been taught that way. Wing Chun has become by far the most popular southern style of kung fu in the world, if not the most popular style of kung fu in the world. But schools have become a lot more commercial. The simple syllabus has often been dragged out and eked out, and you have people following a teacher for many years, and that really grates with me. Wing Chun really is a style to be taught very quickly, and not only that. I think I may upset some people here when I say this. I really believe that the function of an honest teacher is to make himself redundant sooner rather than later. So it becomes like a coach, if you like. Yeah. So once and I don't mean this for everybody, but once you've found some students who are promising, who are intelligent, who really listen, who don't have an agenda, etc., you can teach them the Wing Chun concepts and techniques in a relatively short period of time. And then comes a point where they start to trust their own wisdom. They will generate their own insights. And they can get to a teaching place a lot sooner than a lot of people think. So I think it really is a like a fast-track method to protecting yourself. However, if you want to really, really go into the deeper into Wing Chun, that becomes a lifetime study. But it's not going to affect your or improve your fighting ability very much. That can be done very, very, quickly. Yeah. Well, I could go on, about why I think Wing Chun is, such a wonderful system. I can't think of anything, like it. Yeah. I can see its similarities to and overlaps with Western boxing to a certain extent, but I think Wing Chun's got a little bit more, more sort of control over the opponent that boxing has, and to say that Wing Chun doesn't work against a good boxer, well, the answer is yes and no. Yeah. If your Wing Chun is pretty crappy and you don't know too much about Wing Chun, you're going to come to grief against even a moderate sort of boxer. But if you understand it and you meet for the first time, I can tell you that a lot of boxers have found difficulty in coping with the sudden onslaught of a Wing Chun guy. That pressure they're just not used to. But boxers are smart. After a little while, they work it out, and then they find a way to defend themselves against the Wing Chun guy. But then, as I say, Wing Chun wasn't meant for sparring or ring fighting. It's for that short, sweet, encounter in the street. Yeah.